I think, I think as your colleague mentioned, it's certainly not the be-all and end-all as far as tapering is concerned, but it does remove one of the uncertainties, I guess, for the Fed. I mean, it would have been difficult for the Fed to taper if there was a high chance of no budget deal and all the uncertainties, of course, that would have come with that. But the fact is that there is now a deal, and more importantly, the US data has been generally surprising positively in the last month or so. So, while the market had been expecting a March taper, I think the probability of that right now is pretty low. My own colleagues in the US have stuck throughout the last few months, basically since tapering was delayed, to the January meeting. And of course, I think there is now a not insubstantial risk of at least a modest taper, in December, later this month. Maybe a 40% chance, or even higher than that. Yes, I think India will do well. I mean, of course, there is that potential tapering hurdle to get over. We saw what can happen when tapering concerns are high. Back in August, of course, and the rupee was extremely weak at that time. The question is India better placed to cope with tapering this time around? And I think the answer is yes, it is better placed. The current account deficit is improved. Obviously, interest rates are higher, both policy rates and bond yields. The currency is lower, or the currency is stronger than it was at that time. Weaker than it was at that time. So, conditions are better. But having said that, I'd be surprised if there was no impact there, and that will take its toll on all India's markets for at least for a while. But I agree. I mean, I think growth has bottomed. I think people got too bearish. I think the next move in consensus forecasts for GDP growth is going to be upwards rather than downwards, bringing to an end a very long sequence of downgrades. And I think growth will surprise on the upside, led by exports and not just marginally stronger agricultural output growth, but massively stronger than expected agricultural output growth, possibly in the order of a double-digit increase, and that will have second-round benefits to the economy as well. So we remain relatively optimistic on the growth outlook. I don't think it's inevitable, but I agree that I think it's more likely than not. We certainly do expect Dr. Rajan to implement another 25 basis point hike, really on the basis that he can't ignore the latest inflationary signals. I mean, if consumer price inflation does come in at double digits or very close to double digits, that he's not going to like that. And I think perhaps even more worrying in some senses is if we look at what's happening to the core WPI, bearing in mind that was the one area of inflation that was very low, it is no longer very low. Particularly if we look at it on some sort of seasonally adjusted sequential basis. So not the year on year is effectively lagging. So if we season adjust it and take a 3-month on 3-month annualized change, that's now running itself at about 6.5–7%. So it's clear that the impact of the previous rupee depreciation is filtering through to core elements of the WPI as well, and that I think is bound to concern Dr. Rajan and the central bank more generally.